Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today I want to talk about something that almost everyone I've spoken to lately has strong feelings about, even if they don't always agree on the answer. And that question is simple on the surface, but incredibly complicated once you dig into it. Is the economy actually doing well right now, or does it just look good in official reports while everyday life still feels tight? Because here's what's interesting. When I talk to people, I keep hearing two completely different stories. Some tell me their income is higher than it was a couple of years ago. Their retirement accounts look better. Their companies are hiring again. They feel cautiously optimistic. But then I talk to small business owners, restaurant owners, people in local services, and they tell me foot traffic is down, customers are more careful, margins are thin, and every month feels like a balancing act. Both groups are telling the truth, and that's the first thing we need to accept if we want to understand what's actually happening. One of the biggest mistakes we make in economic debates is assuming the economy is one single experience. It isn't. The American economy is huge, layered, and uneven by design. Right now, it's going through a period of adjustment, or if you want a more honest word, a restructuring. That doesn't mean collapse, and it doesn't mean everything is suddenly great. It means the system is changing how value is created, where money flows, and who benefits first. Whenever that happens, some people feel relief before others do, and some feel pressure long before they see any upside. Now, if we look at the official numbers, they're not imaginary. According to government data, the U.S. economy grew at an annualized rate of over 4% in the third quarter. That's a strong number by any developed country standard. It's faster than the previous quarter, and it's stronger than many people expected at the beginning of the year. So when someone says, on paper, the economy looks solid, they're not wrong. The data says growth is happening. But growth alone doesn't tell the full story. The more important question is where that growth is coming from and how evenly it's distributed. A big part of recent growth has been driven by consumer spending, which has remained surprisingly resilient. Spending rose steadily from the second quarter into the third, and that helped keep overall output moving upward. But again, this doesn't mean everyone is spending freely. What it means is that spending hasn't collapsed, and in certain income brackets, it's actually increased. Higher income households, people with stable jobs, investments, or appreciating assets, are still spending on travel, entertainment, and services. Meanwhile, many middle and lower income households are far more cautious. They're prioritizing essentials, leaning more on credit, and cutting back where they can. This is why you can see strong aggregate consumption numbers at the same time that many small businesses feel like demand is softer than it used to be. Both realities can exist simultaneously, and right now, they do. Another piece of the growth picture that's getting a lot of attention is trade. Recent data shows that net exports made a meaningful positive contribution to GDP growth. Exports rose, imports declined modestly, and that shift helped push overall growth higher. For an economy that has long-run trade deficits, that's notable. It's not something that happens by accident, and it's not something that should be ignored. Now, whenever trade comes up, tariffs come up. And whenever tariffs come up, the conversation gets emotional fast. Some people treat tariffs as an obvious mistake. Others treat them as an obvious solution. Reality, as usual, is more complicated. Tariffs raise costs in some areas and create uncertainty for businesses. At the same time, they also change incentives. They can encourage companies to rethink supply chains, shift production, or invest domestically. They also generate government revenue, which matters more than many people admit. What we're seeing right now are early signals, not final outcomes. Trade patterns don't change overnight. Supply chains don't rebuild in a single quarter. But when exports rise and imports fall, even modestly, it tells us that something is shifting. Whether that shift becomes durable depends on many factors: global demand, exchange rates, technology, energy costs, and policy stability. One effect of tariffs that often gets overlooked is revenue. Tariff collections have increased significantly, bringing in tens of billions of dollars. That revenue doesn't solve all fiscal problems, but it does reduce pressure elsewhere and creates room for other policy choices. It's not a magic fix, but it's part of the broader picture. Of course, trade policy doesn't exist in a vacuum. Legal uncertainty matters too. Ongoing debates about executive authority, court challenges, and future policy changes all add risk. Businesses don't like sudden reversals. Markets don't like unpredictability. In practice, major economic shifts tend to be adjusted gradually rather than abruptly, because institutions understand that sharp changes can ripple through the real economy in ways that are hard to control. Now, let's talk about jobs, because this is where numbers can be especially misleading. One interesting trend lately is that more people are re-entering the labor force. These are people who weren't counted as unemployed before because they weren't actively looking for work. When they start looking again, it can temporarily push unemployment metrics higher. Even though the underlying trend is healthier, it suggests people believe opportunities exist. It suggests labor demand is strong enough to pull people back in. If economic growth stays near current levels, job creation is likely to remain steady rather than explosive. That's not a bad thing. Sustainable job growth matters more than headline spikes. It allows wages to rise gradually without reigniting inflation too aggressively, and it gives businesses time to adapt. Corporate profits have also increased sharply, which tells us companies are still finding ways to operate efficiently in this environment. At the same time, business investment has slowed somewhat. That may seem contradictory, but it actually makes sense. Investment decisions depend heavily on interest rates and expectations. Many firms are waiting to see where borrowing costs go and how stable demand really is. That's not panic. It's caution. Inflation, meanwhile, remains the issue that almost everyone feels directly. Prices are no longer rising at the pace they were before, but they're still higher than the central bank's preferred target. Energy prices play a huge role here, as does housing. Housing in particular is the most stubborn problem in the entire system. Home prices remain high, mortgage rates are elevated, and supply is constrained in many markets. The reasons for this aren't mysterious. Zoning rules, regulatory layers, permitting delays, and financing costs all add up. In some markets, a significant portion of housing costs comes not from materials or labor, but from compliance and regulation. That's not something any single administration can fix quickly. Federal policy matters, but state and local governments play an enormous role, and change there is slow. Energy costs, on the other hand, ripple through everything. Transportation, food, manufacturing, logistics, all of it. When energy prices come down, pressure eases across the economy. When they rise, everything feels tighter. That's why energy policy has consequences far beyond political talking points. We also see differences across regions. Some states and metropolitan areas experience higher inflation than others, especially where energy and housing costs are higher. This isn't just about politics. It's about geography, infrastructure, regulation, and local market conditions. Comparing costs across regions helps explain why economic sentiment varies so widely from place to place. So where does all of this leave us? The honest answer is somewhere in the middle of the extreme narratives. The U.S. economy is growing. That growth is real, but it's uneven, and it comes with trade-offs. Some policies are showing early effects. Others will take years to evaluate properly. Major challenges remain, especially in housing affordability and cost of living pressures for lower and middle-income households. If energy costs ease further, if investment picks up as interest rates adjust, and if domestic production continues to expand gradually, the outlook for the next couple of years is cautiously positive. Not perfect, not painless, but not bleak either. The biggest mistake we can make right now is forcing the economy into a simple story. Either everything is great or everything is broken. Reality is more complicated, and understanding that complexity doesn't require blind optimism or constant outrage. It requires patience, attention, and a willingness to accept that transitions are uncomfortable by nature. This isn't a miracle boom, and it isn't a collapse. It's a transition. And how well it works in the long run depends not just on policy, but on how honestly we understand what's actually happening beneath the headlines. Thanks for watching. If you found this perspective useful, take a moment to subscribe, share your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.